Chapter 19. The Babies Grow Up. "Bring on the Vita-Wonks," said Mr. Wonka. "We'll soon fix these two babies." And Oompa Loompa ran forward with a small bottle and a couple of silver teaspoons. "Wait just 1 minute," snapped Grandma Georgina. "What sort of devilish dumpery are you up to now?" "It's all right, Grandma," said Charlie. "I promise you it's all right. Vita-Wonk does the opposite of Wonkavite. It makes you older. It's what we gave you when you were a minus. It saved you." "You gave me too much," snapped the old woman. "We had to, Grandma, and now you want to do the same to Grandpa George?" "Of course we don't," said Charlie. "I finished up 358 years old," she went on. "What's to stop you making another little mistake and giving him 50 times more than you gave me? Then I'd suddenly have a 20,000-year-old caveman in bed." Imagine that. And him with a big knobby club in one hand and dragging me around by my hair with the other. "No, thank you." "Grandma," Charlie said patiently, "with you we had to use a spray because you were a minus. You were a ghost. But here, Mr. Wonka can—" "Don't talk to me about that man," she cried. "He's batty as a bullfrog." "No, Grandma, he's not. And here he can measure it out exactly right, drop by drop, and feed it into their mouths." "That's true, isn't it, Mr. Wonka?" "Charlie," said Mr. Wonka, "I can see that the factory is going to be in good hands when I retire. You learn very fast." "I'm so pleased I chose you, my dear boy, so very pleased." "Now then, what's the verdict? Do we leave them as babies or do we grow them up with Vita-Wonk?" "You go ahead, Mr. Wonka," said Grandpa Joe. "I'd like you to grow my Josie up so she's just the same as before, 80 years old." "Thank you, sir," said Mr. Wonka. "I appreciate the confidence you place in me. But what about the other one, Grandpa George?" "Oh, all right then," said Grandma Georgina. "But if he ends up a caveman, I don't want him in this bed any more." "That's settled then," said Mr. Wonka. "Come along, Charlie. We'll do them both together. You hold one spoon and I'll hold the other. I shall measure out 4 drops and 4 drops only into each mouth, and we'll wake them up and pop it into their mouths." "Which one shall I do, Mr. Wonka?" "You do Grandma Josephine, the tiny one. I'll do Grandpa George, the 1-year-old. Here's your spoon." Charlie took the spoon and held it out. Mr. Wonka opened the bottle and dripped 4 drops of oily black liquid into Charlie's spoon. Then he did the same to his own. He handed the bottle back to the Oompa Loompa. "Shouldn't someone hold the babies while you give it?" said Grandpa Joe. "I'll hold Grandma Josephine." "Are you mad?" said Mr. Wonka. "Do you realise that Vita-Wonk acts instantly? It's not 1 year a second like Wonkavite. Vita-Wonk is as quick as lightning. The moment the medicine is swallowed, ping, it all happens. The getting bigger and the growing older is everything else all happens in 1 second. So don't you see, my dear sir," he said to Grandpa Joe, "that one moment you'll be holding a tiny baby in your arms. Just 1 second later you'll find yourself staggering about with an 80-year-old woman, and you drop her like a ton of bricks on the floor." "Oh, I see what you mean," said Grandpa Joe. "All right, all set, Charlie?" "All set, Mr. Wonka." Charlie moved around the bed to where the tiny sleeping baby lay. He placed one hand behind her head and lifted it. The baby awoke and started yelling. Mr. Wonka was on the other side of the bed doing the same to the 1-year-old George. "Both together now, Charlie," said Mr. Wonka. "Ready, steady, go." "Pop it in, Charlie." Charlie pushed his spoon into the mouth of the baby and tipped the drops down her throat. "Make sure she swallows it," cried Mr. Wonka. "Won't work until it gets into their tummies." It is difficult to explain what happened next, and whatever it was, it only lasted for 1 second. A second is about as long as it takes you to say aloud and quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is how long it took, with Charlie watching closely for the tiny baby to grow and swell and wrinkle into the 80-year-old Grandma Josephine. It was a frightening thing to see. It was like an explosion. A small baby suddenly exploded into an old woman, and Charlie all at once found himself staring straight into the well-known and much-loved wrinkly old face of his Grandma Josephine. "Hello, my darling," she said. "Where have you come from?" "Josie," cried Grandpa Joe, rushing forward. "How marvellous, you're back." "I didn't know I'd been away," she said. Grandpa George had also made a successful comeback. You were Better looking as a baby, Grandma Georgina said to him. But I'm glad you've grown up again, George, for one reason. What's that? Asked Grandpa George. You won't wet the bed any more.